Yes, there's a question, how can I find the videos on Canvas? So they are in here under session 1, 2, the recordings. Oh, that's because I haven't clicked this button. Oh, thank you. Yes. Sorry about that. Uh-huh. There are all these publish buttons, and then you got to publish the button within the publish button, and then nothing will be published unless everything is published, and then there's too many publish. I don't know. Seems a bit too much. Anyways, now it should be there. You should find it. Okay. So yeah, I will update the course progress, which I talked about last time, the changes. So don't think we're gonna be going to be covering a whole lot of new ground this week. Essentially, just to get some of you started with the full body sculpt if you're interested in doing that. Otherwise, helping you out with baking if someone still has some issues or something. So again, just a reminder, the bust is the last mandatory. The baking of the bust is the last mandatory, and then you can do a full body sculpt if you like. So I usually go in here and I click there. Document double. It resizes the document so that I have a little bit more space to work with. I also turn down the range. That's how I like it. So if we go to the, well anyways, this will be reset if I open some of the projects though. So there are some like pre-made meshes in here. I mean, you can have a look at them. If you do decide to use like one of these, it would need to be like a very rough starting point from where you end up, obviously. There are also some mannequins. We covered that briefly. Double click here. These mannequins are C-sphere rigs, which you can turn into a mesh, which you can sculpt on. So there are all these different approaches to how you can start out building something. It's really just comes down to your preference. But if I, for instance, I double click this, yeah. So these are C-spheres. So they work with move, or I can actually, I can be in draw, I guess. Oh no, I gotta be move and move them around. Yes. So then you can quickly kind of create a pose. This would, maybe if he's arching back a little bit like this, would be more kind of a heroic pose. Or you know, get that initial pose. A little bit like you would do with traditional sculpting if you have like an armature and you're building out an armature. So now he's drunk. And so, yeah, you just keep moving these C-spheres around. It's pretty interesting. Now he's, yeah, now he's not doing so well. So then you can turn these into, I guess here, adaptive skin. So you can preview it. Okay, that's what it'll do. And then just make, I usually do that. And then make adaptive skin. Should do it. Now we should be able to turn this into a Dynamesh. So here, yeah. So now we can just sculpt and go from there. Do you think maybe? All right, so yeah, see if we can't split things. Let me see. Yeah, so I do think we need to make this first. I would make this polymesh 3D. So if you now we should be able to split things. Yeah, yeah. So if you do that, you make an armature based on the mannequins. Just when you're happy with it, and you make the adaptive skin, I would hit this make polymesh 3D button, and then everything is good. Now this is completely kind of normal. You can sculpt, Dynamesh, whatever. Feel free. So that, that's just one way of starting. I could have started out with literally just a few Dynamesh spheres. Or if you have like a base mesh that you built yourself, or you find a base mesh that you like, you can start out using that. Like I said, if you do that, you probably want to make sure it's really just a crude starting point because for the delivery, obviously, if you just deliver something that's like a slightly modified base mesh, that would be not so nice. So, let's see. What is this a different? Okay. Yeah, move brush. I can move things around. So same procedure. We will keep things low in the primary stages, kind of fleshing things out. I would, you can keep it kind of surprisingly low. It's kind of your preference, but sort of kind of a very modest number of polys, at least for fleshing out shapes. So I don't know what I'm doing. So just like, I usually start out probably with kind of the bust anyways, and then I kind of take it from there. So there's nothing wrong. You could just start out with a sphere and keep going if you choose to do that. Or put a few spheres together, like be experimenting with volumes. So did you watch the summit, CGArt Summit? Or maybe you've seen some of the other summit videos. There was just the CGArt Summit, so maybe some of you watched it. I really, for those of you who haven't really seen any of them, I really recommend watching them, at least some of the summit videos, because you'll see a whole lot of artists working, and people really have their own ways of doing things. So it's like finding your own preference. So you can very quickly like flesh out ideas at this level of like, without too many polys. So I keep like moving around the object, keep observing it from different angles. So clay buildup, move brush. So I think part of the challenge here, at least the way I see it initially, would be to sort of keep this modest number of polys for a while, like while you're fleshing out the primary forms, because so that you're kind of working generally at this stage throughout the model, so that this would prevent you from over emphasizing and detailing on some areas, and then others are quite crude. So that takes a little bit of patience, but I would just like keep at it for this. And then yeah, so just keep building from there. You can add things. Let's see. There's insert mesh. Let's not do that yet. So BSH, we have something called a snake hook. It's kind of nice. I can like drag out. It's kind of like the move. It's only that it has some different settings so that it can do something like that. I just drag things out. And then if you end up with these really pointy areas, you got to be a little bit careful with the Dynamesh so that it doesn't. Um, Sometimes the Dynamesh can cause like little holes and things, and typically that's because these meshes become very, very thin. But you can try it, re-Dynamesh it, and see if it's okay. So if you have these very thin areas, you can go BIN for inflate, and that will kind of blow air into the mesh. And then you just re-Dynamesh it. So it's hard to actually get that with any other tool except for the inflate. So here you see it's just kind of like you can rough things in. So there's nothing wrong like just starting from, oops, and that's because of, okay, so here I did that large clay build-up stroke in the back and it kind of affected the front. And again, that we have a little masking option here under brush, auto masking, back face mask. This is particularly useful. So I usually go in there and turn that on because I actually do want to only affect the front usually when I'm sculpting. But now it's not going to have that effect on the other side. Yeah. I don't know when I feel like it. No, I usually forget to turn it on, and then something happens, and then, oh, I gotta turn it on. No, not really. Well, if you wanted to affect both sides of the mesh, yeah. But usually it's not that big of a problem, actually, because it's really kind of only when you have very thin meshes that would be kind of a problem. Okay, so we could look at some anatomy here, references. And so you can choose to like build up kind of a naked body to flesh in all the anatomy structure. That could be a useful exercise anyways. And then like depending on the needs of your model, like if you were to be, oh, there's something wrong with my there. Depending on the needs of your model, whether you would be, for instance, simulating cloth, that would be a case in which it would be very helpful to have a full body sculpt underneath the clothing anyways. If you're not going to be simulating the cloth, you can sculpt the clothing yourself, but even for that, it can be kind of useful to have this primary form established and then do something like extract clothing off of the model. So in this stage, this is kind of to me like drawing in 3D, right? So it's like, this is very, very rough. I can still do whatever I want, just really kind of just trying things out. So keeping things fairly low. See, it's kind of really keep sculpting. And just in this case, though, I'm just kind of experimenting with the pose here, kind of like this. So I can also like mask off. So let me change the mask pen to a mask curve. So, okay, now I have a mask curve pen, which doesn't work. Lasso probably is what it's called. Mask lasso. Okay. So now I can go like that and like make a little mask here, for instance. And if I control click, I can invert the mask. So if I go W to move, now they've changed the move tool. Like I can obviously work like this, which is also very powerful, like to move things around, play with the overall, you know, pose. So maybe that's quicker if I go like that, and then I'm just going to move that whole thing like this. So move, clay buildup. I can mask areas. I'm probably going to erase those. So what's this muscle called here? Goes like from underneath, like kind of tucked in up at the ear, like under the ear, and then goes to the front, kind of curving down and attaches here at the kind of collarbone. Go sternocleidomastoid. This guy. But we don't have to really know the names if we just Google human anatomy and then look for the superficial. How can I make this go away? No. The superficial musculature there. And then just kind of use that as a visual reference for sculpting. Maybe we want to flesh out the trapezius, kind of upper, which would kind of influence the silhouette from the front. So if I press V, I can toggle between like the primary and the secondary color, which you can't see, but there are two kind of swatches at the bottom. That's useful for quickly like looking at the silhouette that I'm building. So in this primary stage, that's kind of the deal. Sort of one of the main things we're doing is that we're kind of establishing the overall silhouette, the overall pose, and sort of the feel of the. So this could be a lengthy process. This is where a lot happens. Keeping things fairly low. See, this is a fairly low dynamesh, but it's kind of just fleshing things out. So we have the deltoids. And then sort of underneath, the deltoid would wrap over. These are the biceps would come underneath here. And then we have the pecs. So see if we can flesh out something here pretty quickly. And then smooth things out. So it's just working pretty roughly. Let's see. Yeah, so BSH, snake hook. I can like drag this out. I'm gonna probably gonna arch his back a little bit more if he has that pose. Here's this thing. Hunchback. So yeah. we don't really need all of those internal organs and, you know, so maybe I would just do human. Let's see. You can also look at bodies. So, I mean, I think it's a useful exercise to try to build like a muscle guy or a muscle woman, uh, just to try that and sort of to get an idea of all the superficial musculature. But then, obviously, there's a tendency in CG to be creating a lot of very bulky characters because, well, it seems like there's like this emphasis on placing musculature, and then as a consequence, a lot of the characters become very bulky, very like hunky. But add some fatty tissue, maybe look at how you can then just soften out the forms. So even though you're fleshing in musculature, you can really just soften things out, smooth it out. It's not really the case that we really have to. We're not really building yeah, you get the idea. Bodybuilders necessarily. But we're gonna have fun with this. Like create some crazy concepts. Push this a little bit. Yeah, that's different. Starting to look like a horse. I don't want that. Just bring it in there and turn a Dynamesh on and then keep dragging out portions. So, uh, yeah, you can literally do this. Like, just keep dragging out portions of the mesh. Let's see, Damien standard. Make a kind of a jaw here. Accentuate some of that jawline. This would be. So you'd probably be working a while, on this level, primary stage. And hands are tricky. Yeah, I'm just gonna rough in like the shape of the palm of the hand. Maybe that's the thumb. And there would be fingers here eventually, but right now it's kind of like just a placement. So if I wanted to rotate like the palm right now, I could mask it out, invert the mask, go to my move. Actually, this is the old school. If you turn this on and off, you get the old transpose master. I guess we can move this around too, but I don't know how to use that properly yet. But if I click there, I can draw out like this transpose line. If I click rotate, if I hold in the middle, I can rotate around that pivot. But I guess now I can even change it. No, it pops back there. So, okay, so I don't know how to. I would just do this and rotate. Holding shift, it will rotate around this pivot. See that? if I hold the middle and hold shift and rotate in the transpose tool, I can rotate around this pivot. There's probably an easy way to do it with the new transform tool there, but anyway, so I can go, if I wanted to curve again the palm, I could mask this area off and draw out this tool again, go to rotate. This time I want to rotate around this pivot, so I can grab the bottom and it will actually rotate around that pivot. So if I grab the bottom, I got to be in the middle of the circle so that you see that it's enabled. It has that little red circle, and then just rotate. So I'm just fleshing out a hand that way. Again, snake hook. Maybe I just want to have a little thumb. And I could start just hinting at some fingers. So the snake hook is kind of nice. So it's still, I mean, this is kept low. It's much easier to work with the mesh. Like you're not struggling with a heavy density mesh. So BDS. I like the Damien standard if I want to like really punch areas in. Just recompute. So I would normally be kind of trying to look at some anatomical reference, at least have the anatomical reference up next to me. That would just influence this, but it's kind of nice to have that on a separate monitor and then. It's really kind of a modest amount of poly, so you could do a lot with that. It's like. So the trick here is not to get too, again, you don't want to get too kind of caught up in any specific area. It's kind of, you're kind of working. It takes a little bit of practice to get into that mindset, I think, but you have to keep working a bit rough and just move around and smooth things down. This is just to define it. It doesn't need to be that bulky. Yes, he's kind of a big guy. He probably has big arms. So again, I could go for something like BIN to do a inflate. Sort of inflate. Let's see. Yeah, so that button doesn't always seem to work. There's a little dynamic button on the draw size, which is actually kind of important. It is there if you press S, so it should work. It doesn't seem to kind of work. If you press spacebar, it's also there. Is that the dynamic button is pretty important because if you press it, it means that your draw size you will no longer be able to do this. So I need to have very large draw sizes sometimes. If I want to inflate this, it's easier to do that on this draw size, just inflate that whole area. Or move. But I kind of like that actually. Man, let me just inflate. So it's just experimenting, trying things. Again, I gotta go hit V. I can toggle, see the silhouette. And I also kind of like Damien standard for fleshing in some areas like musculature, just to define. we have the extensors coming down here. They're actually wrapping around like this. In other words, if you have your thumb sort of pointing out, not pointing towards yourself, but pointing out, if the palm of the hand were to be rotated 180 degrees, the extensors would kind of go straight down. But if you point your thumb towards yourself, you're actually kind of wrapping your hand wraps around, which makes sense. It would need to do that. So you're actually this is now wrapped around like that. So you can just flesh in the extensors like that, kind of starting up here at the elbow, and then actually, like I said, wrapping around down towards in direction of the thumb. Here I can go. I like this, like Damien standards. It's just kind of I can draw in little lines which indicate just emphasizes that form. And I don't have to keep it that way, but even it's just like a visual little cue. I'm gonna go in the tiny little snake hook, just pull that up. So maybe it's a little flat. So uh, remember to observe like also from the top. So you see this is very flat. Just one like a common maybe mistake is that you forget to sort of observe your model from the top or even from the bottom. You sort of have to analyze also these curves. So if you always kind of, it is a little bit different working on a 2D monitor. I think if we were to sculpt this in VR, for instance, we probably it would be quite different. Uh, or arguably, be a little better. Maybe there will be ZBrush VR soon. Who knows? Yeah, I've tried sculpting in VR, and that's why I kind of, this is interesting. But I get tired of being in VR. I don't think I would. I don't know. But like for a quick preview, like what does this actually look like? Then just like quick having the ability to quickly turn it in, like viewing it in VR would be interesting. Yeah. But here you really just have to be mindful of all the curves. So it's like I'm observing it from here and I see it's much less flat. Just that curvature. So that's another thing, like starting to observe forms, not only the forms but also the negative shapes. So you probably, if you're taking art classes, that's kind of a, it's just kind of you internalize this, but you a lot of what you're doing is that you're constantly observing the contours as well. It's not only the musculature and what's going on. Let's see. So if I want to be working now in certain areas, I can hold Control Shift. That will activate Select Rectangle. Control Shift, and I can go like that. The rest of the model is still here, but I can just now focus in on this area. Very useful. So here, maybe there would be some more fatty tissue. So it could be helpful not only to look at anatomical reference for musculature, but actually look at more fatty tissue and fat people as well. So don't worry about having at times some really disturbing reference images up on your monitors. We all do that. And don't judge. So, for instance, you could be making a monster or a zombie, and then it would be kind of useful to look up some flesh wounds, and like, no joke, it would be interesting. Like, or even like, so this sounds harsh, but like burn victims, because it's a great reference for skin. Um, so you will have a lot of disturbing images up, but just get used to that. That sort of, yeah, that can happen if you see some people having some disturbing reference images, depending on what you're making. Or if we're all making fairies, then that's not such a big concern. Stick to fairies. So, yeah. So I don't know, do you have any questions? This is, yeah. Oh, I didn't turn it on. Yeah, see, I just forgot. Yeah, so I typically sculpt a lot with it off as well to just tell shapes, but then I would keep toggling on and off. You definitely have to enable perspective to see what it would look like. I would like to put on a helmet and like, wow, well, okay, what does it actually look like in VR? But because you really do need to be able to tell the forms, and it's kind of hard. But yeah, so definitely P, you can toggle on and off perspective. So I do that all the time, actually. So this is less technical, so just sculpting. So Damien standard. And then ease that out. Yeah, there's also other like slash, let's see, BS, what's that, /3. It has a little bit of a different effect, like carving in. It's also quite nice. I can turn off the C intensity quite a bit. It's similar to Damien Standard, but it's a bit harsher. I'll leave a little bit of a harsher line. There's also, I mean, you can obviously just do like a standard brush and then go in and select an alpha, like any kind of pointy alpha. And then, yeah, sculpt. You can also adjust the curve. Let's see, where's that? I don't ever do that. Edit curve. This would be the curve of the brush, like the profile curve of the actual brush. You can also affect this if you want to experiment with having a different stroke. So you don't always have to rely on any of the preset brushes. Like I set this to C sub, so it's a standard brush with an alpha 47 set to C sub. Now it's just giving me that pointy alpha. that also has a similar effect. Yeah, there is let's see, transform posable symmetry, but it doesn't always work. So let's try that later. So yeah, so that's a good point. So what if you have an asymmetrical pose? So typically for a concept sculpt, maybe you would want to add some asymmetry actually to, again, like just show a little bit more of the character, like what kind of a pose would he have? This is a very artificial 100% symmetrical pose. So that really adds a lot, that asymmetry. So I typically I would always just start out symmetrical, and I would keep it symmetrical for the longest time. uh, I think some of this is actually sticking to it for a little bit longer than maybe you're used to. It's like just or not, maybe you are, but just stick to this level of detail. You don't need a lot of polys really. See, this is not heavy. But again, you can find your own preference. But this is like 22,000. It's very low. And the benefit is that it's just a little bit more smooth to work with. Then I can still read forms, and it's easier to try things. Like, looks like a mustache. It's not what I want. Yeah, so we'll try to give him a little asymmetrical pose and then see what we can do to maybe we can try the posable symmetry. Doesn't really, but I would then turn off symmetry and I would work asymmetrically with the sculpt. Which you can do. I mean, you can work asymmetrically from the beginning if you wanted to, but it's hard. And we have symmetry, which is wonderful. He's not a happy guy, that's for sure. Looks kinda we can make him happy. Maybe he is happy. Now he's just disturbing. So anyways, for the mouth, you can just, I'm just like pushing in with clay buildup and I'm reconfiguring the Dynamesh. If you want to, again, depending on the needs of your model, but you can sculpt, obviously, for for a production mesh. Oh lordy. You can literally just sculpt like a cavity like this, and then push that cavity in. So in the production mesh, you do want a completely closed off. But we don't really have to think about that at this stage, but I'm just telling you guys. Uh, in the production mesh, we do want a completely closed off mesh so that we don't really want holes for the mouth or inside the, or for the eyes or inside the mouth cavity either. For a full body guy like this. All right, so let's pull out some airs. Another way to do this would be to actually mask off an area like this. Oops. Let me Let me turn on the mask pen again. Oh no, mask perfect circle. I don't want that. Mask perfect mask pen. There it is. That's the kind of one that's here by default. I can just draw in a mask. Let's say the ear. Typically, like from the top of the eyebrows to the bottom of what would be the nose. It's like typically the shape of the ear or the height. And then control click to invert, and I can actually use move again and maybe activate this gizmo. I can again draw out. Let's see, it's a little tricky. I guess I don't have to do that. Let's try the new one. Invert the mask and then pull this out. So you can do that and then reconfigure the dynamish, and there we have that little piece. And then VSH. Okay. Oh yeah. So, oh no, there's something else. Okay. Home. Oh, a house. Uh-oh. Yeah, I don't really know how to use that yet, so can't show you that. And also, like now, if I really just wanted to manipulate the errors, I can mask off that region, invert the mask, and now just even like for snake hook or move, only be moving that region, which is helpful. Then Dynamesh. Some sort of errors. Oops. BDS. Oh no. So that, yeah, so there I almost entered dynamic subdivisions. I mentioned that you got to be careful if you press D, you're actually enabling dynamic subdivisions, and that will really make it difficult to sculpt. So just by pressing D, you might experience that, whoa, everything kind of lags and it becomes almost impossible to sculpt. It's just probably because you enabled dynamic subdivisions. You see it here. So then you would disable that. All right, I guess we'll give them a nose. I guess some more cheeks would be nice. Then maybe a larger eye socket. Probably give him more of a forehead. Just moving that up. Still experiment with the shapes. I can move things around. You know, do something more drastic. Maybe a little bit more bold design. Trying to make things a little less generic. Like sometimes you push your design just to something that might seem a little crazy, but then maybe that's something interesting. Yeah, so now maybe I'm at a point where sort of the primary forms would still work on the back, but let's focus here. I'd obviously work more, but you can just spend as long as you want in this primary stage, really just fleshing out forms with a few polys. Also do some renders. You can do like a BPR just to see like shadows. If Keyshot were working, that would also be nice. It's not working. Yes, any other questions, concerns, complaints? I'm going to flesh in the extensors. Work here. So I think I'm going to increase the Dynamesh just a little bit. So resolution, maybe I'll go up to like 200 or something. So now we can work with these forms, like establishing secondary shapes. Smoothing things out. Yep. I don't know. It's expected, but you can do like a, oops. No. You have these global operations, so you can do like a polish or smooth. You can do a global smooth. Would be as if you went over the entire model and with smooth. So yeah, let me just save this. And it's gonna look crappy for a long time when you're sculpting. Everything sucks for a long time. This is 181004 sculpt. So yeah, no, really, like everything sucks for a really long time. So it's like bearing with looking at things you're making which suck. Then gradually, maybe it will start sucking less. It's the only way to do it. But that realization, I think, is very important, and just kind of recognize it. Yeah, I think it sucks. It's not perfect. It's not. It's not even good. That's okay. They're here for me. Oh no. This is too much. It's too many polys. I have to reduce. Don't like it. It's too heavy. Let's do 100. So this is also kind of arbitrary, right? The slider there, it's just kind of whatever number, and then you gotta check No, it's 420,000. I think probably that's a little high. So 80. But then, yeah, just gotta try to. I want this to be a little bit more responsive because if you have too much polys there, it slows everything down. So you have to keep. Becomes difficult smoothing, difficult sculpting. Really, and you don't need that resolution. You only need it for tertiary shapes like pores and wrinkles, which I'm not even close to. This would just be a stage where you're kind of still defining the character. So this kind of how you roughly kind of divide the sculpt into three phases, at least kind of conceptually, the way you think about it. It's just maybe now I'm done with the primary shapes, kind of establish the silhouette, establish the main kind of design, main concept. Now fleshing this out would be the secondary forms. Kind of way to look at it. So it's just, yep. So maybe he needs a little bit more of a nasolabial fold here. I'm going to start addressing that horrible mouth. Some people really like to put in some like detailed eyes at the beginning, and they claim that it's really important to be looking at beautiful eyes. I don't agree, but if you want to do that, go ahead. I think whatever works, whatever works. I would be careful like making general rules or kind of so many different approaches to this, which will be apparent if you watch some of the summit videos. It's really a lot of different ways. And who cares how you made it? It's like you made it. So that's the Damien standard. I'm gonna change to BST, my standard brush that I set up. It's gonna have a little bit of a harsher carving effect and less of the, like with the Damien standard, you also get a little bit like a pinching, which this would not give me. All right, so maybe I'll just poke in. I'll just hold clay buildup and I'll just push this in. I can also mask this area. Let's see. Let me again go to my mask pen. Just do a little mask, invert the mask, and then just, I guess I can use this. Uh, use that gizmo, pull that in. Maybe I can also scale it. Whoops. What'd you say? Really? How do I do it? Okay. Alt. Oh, click the house. Of course. Ah, sweet. Alt, click house, then. Ah, sweet. And then I can make changes. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, no, it's probably excellent. I just don't know it. Okay, so now there are some, oops. Uh, oops, I also kind of pushed things in the back. Let me just undo that. No. Anyways, yeah, you don't even have to do that. I could also just clay build up. Let's see. And Alt, just push in. Maybe that's even as simple. And then reconfigure the Dynamesh. Now we have a little eye socket in there, and I can place just some spheres, right? Or I could use, there's something called insert mesh brushes. So BI, here we have various insert meshes. So you can experiment with these. We have some insert primitives brush. So here I can insert a sphere. And I can actually just draw that out on the surface. And that will insert that. So then when I clear this, let's see, let me get out of that brush. You see that it's now placed, but it's on the same subtool, right? But if I press Shift F, we'll see that it's actually, it has a different color. So that means they're in different poly groups. So in ZBrush we have, if we go down to the tool menu here, poly groups. We have ways of organizing a mesh even in groups. So yeah, but for this purpose, just we see that with the insert meshes, then it will actually, yes, it's a part of the same subtool, but it's still a separate poly group. And that means we can actually go to the subtool menu here and say split, group split. Now that is split up in a separate subtool, which is useful. And then Shift F to turn off the wireframe, and I can Control D, just subdivide that up so that it's nice. And now it has some eyes. Okay. And we can keep reworking the eyelids. Now he's more tired. And again, I can go in there, Control Shift. It will focus in on this area. And then Control Shift click to the side, and that will just, yeah. So yeah, so again, I think as for the primary stage, this would be about like sticking with it. trying to just kind of see how we can um, yeah, how can we emphasize, accentuate forms and keep building, but not go too high and sort of like keep moving around. But obviously the face requires a lot of attention. That's wacky. Move. Maybe I'll plop some simple teeth. So BI, I can use the insert primitives again. Oops. Let's just insert a little cube. Let's just do a symmetrical one for now, and then we're gonna probably, whoops, nice. Cool. And BMV. Again, I could take those out of there, a group split. Now they're on a separate subtool. I can even just split these up again. So split two parts. Okay, now these are separate parts. They're just on their own. I can turn off symmetry and now just place these. So what was it? Alt and then click that one. No, whatever. So how can I center the pivot? Does anyone know? In this new tool. Whoops. So yeah, let me if I draw out this old school one, and rotate around that little pivot, move. There, oh, it's not visible here, but there's a transparent version. You can click on, like the model will become transparent. It makes it a little bit easier for the placement. And then, I could turn that one into also a little Dynamesh. Let's see. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, that's okay. And then just keep sculpting the tooth. So let's see. There's also what you can't see here, a solo button towards the bottom. So I can solo this object very quickly. Should we take a little break? Yes? Yeah, let's take a little break. Let's take 10 minutes. Right, let's see. So it's obviously not too late to alter some of the primary shapes, even though we're in the secondary stage. Can obviously move things. It's just that things are a little heavier. Probably want to define those shoulder blades a little bit more. So yeah, I mentioned like adding accessories. So currently we do have some different objects, but like for the teeth I was making. Some of you may have tried this, but if I make a mask, let's say try to make him a hat. If I make a mask and then go down to extract under the subtool palette, then I can hit extract and it will extract that as a geometry. And I just hit accept. So initially it will give me a little mask so that I can keep, well, I don't know what happened. Oh, that's his tooth. Okay. So now he has some sort of piercing on the instead. That's nice. So then, so I could, yeah, let me actually, yeah, I already accepted that. Oh, never mind. So it probably should have been a little thinner, but it's okay. So then you see it just extracts it and it's a separate subtool. I can clear that mask and I can obviously also turn this into a Dynamesh. You just keep working on this little piece. This is a quick way to add some accessories. So maybe for this, we try to maybe I'll turn off symmetry and go. Do you have a BFO, like a little fold brush? Maybe try to make some folds. So you start the fold and then smooth it out as it reaches kind of where there's more pressure on the cloth. Yeah, we could keep working with that, but it needs to be a little destroyed. Probably not so pretty on this guy. Maybe you use the snake hook. You could try some things. Make it a little. Snake hook is kind of nice to just. It's kind of like the move, but it's BSH. Mm. Yeah, anyways, so that's accessories. You can keep adding stuff. Let me just try to fix his teeth a little bit. So I'll split these, oops, split two parts. Now I can work on them individually. So I'm just gonna use this guide that I know how to use. Just gonna draw this out and then I go to rotate. I can rotate it that way. Go to move, click the middle icon. Let's see, since I can't access the transparency feature, which would be very useful right now, but it's clipping on my projector. I'm just gonna hide this guy and sort of work on this tooth a little bit, scale it. So I can also use move tool. This is the old transpose tools. If I draw out the transpose line and I'm in move, I can, if I start moving over here, I can actually move it in on itself. So to scale it, or if I click the middle, I can move it around. And then maybe I'll draw like that and go to rotate and rotate a little bit that way. Whoops, not that way. Yeah, the transparency feature is actually kind of, I do need it at this point because I need to kind of see this mesh at the same time as placing this mesh. But anyways, so BMV. Yeah, and then you can also alt click to change subtools. So if you alt click on a subtool, it will select that subtool. Maybe I'll also sculpt. And the solo feature is also very nice. You can quickly solo out this guy. Let me just delete that one and I will copy the other one over. So in the subtool master, which is a plugin, I have things like mirror. So C plugin, subtool master, mirror. This will mirror this subtool across the x-axis. Boom. And if I wanted it to be separate again, I can split it. Split to parts. Okay. And then alt click it. Now I can work on this guy. So for this, I'm just disabling symmetry, pressing X. All right. Control Shift, so I can focus in on this area. So obviously, again, would be spending more time also at this stage. I think it's kind of resisting the temptation to go like too high too soon. I just keep working around the model at the same like current level of detail. Yeah, I'm just gonna smooth this back. I liked it a little bit more when it was just not so busy. Yes, we could stay at this stage for quite a long time, but I'm not gonna bore you to death. So now we're gonna. So yeah, that will be it for sort of the secondary stage, I think. So I'm just gonna append. Let me save this. So maybe let me append sort of a base, I guess. Just do a cylinder. It's not doing a great job. Smooth. No. Yep. So, I mean, at this stage, the Dynamesh wouldn't really serve a purpose anymore if you're done with all the forms. That's the power of Dynamesh. Like you can do whatever you want, just flesh things out. But then at a certain point, there's no need to have it in Dynamesh anymore. So I would typically, before you would do like tertiary details or take it to a very high level of fidelity, I would probably at this point, if I'm done with this, just do the retopologize, at least like a rough retopologized version with subdivision levels. So I'm just going to do that quickly. So if I duplicate this, I'm just going to run a C remesher. And I don't care too much about the topology. It's just rough version, probably. Anyways, like I don't want to take time off and do a perfect topology now. I just want to keep working. But even if I want to keep working, I don't really need the Dynamesh. So there are some benefits to doing this at a very early stage because now I'd rather have subdivision levels to work with. So there's the theorem measure. That's the retopologized version. That's pretty good. That's actually surprisingly good for. All right, so then this was around 250,000. So I'm just going to subdivide this. Control D, Control D. Yeah, probably one more time. So 700,000, more than I need, but that's okay. And then activate that one. Go project all. And if this fails, I would like adjust the distance a little bit. But it's typically if you have details that are kind of larger details that you might have to experiment with the search distance. There. So that's the retopologized version, and it has subdivision levels. So I can go Shift D, Shift D. So if I wanted to, like at this stage, even work with a light mesh to be altering some of these shapes, I don't have to rely on the Dynamesh anymore for that. I can go down to the lowest subdivision level. Let's see, so BMT, move topological, is also kind of a nice brush because I can move. It looks at the topological distance instead of the world distance. So topologically, the the arm here is far away from the back because it has to go all this way, right? So that it looks for the topological distance. So that means I can be nudging these two parts, whereas the move tool would sort of only look at the world distance. So anyway, I would have spent more time on the back here, but let's not. And yeah, all right. So, but then I can still go up. So pressing D, I can toggle to the upper levels and keep working with the even the secondary forms a little bit, or the tertiary details. So yeah, now that could obviously be quite time consuming if, again, like starting to dealing with wrinkles and skin pores and things like that. You can, I don't think we're gonna go so much into that right now because you probably should be focusing on the secondary forms if you're gonna start modeling this, modeling something. But for the tertiary details, like if you want to take it to that level, I would probably subdivide this as far as it goes. So this is 3 million. Yeah, I mean, let's stay at 3 million a little bit, see what it looks like. So BST, standard brush. You can start experimenting just like with some simple alphas. So, but we can also, right, so do search, like skin alpha, 175 skin alphas for sculpting. Okay, so there are all these alpha libraries that people have made interesting alphas based on pores, and there's yeah, so you could look into that. But sort of how that would work. Typically, you just import an alpha, and you can work kind of like this, where you start dragging out. Let's see, lower the C intensity. So you start dragging out pores, for instance. Like this is too low. Let me subdivide once again. So it'll be at 11 million. Yeah, it's a little better. So this is absolutely no reason to do this with Dynamesh. It has really no purpose. So anyways, you get the idea. So this is kind of based on whichever alpha you would have. You take the time. You can even go in there and sculpt manually, adding pore by pore. What you'd probably want to do is that you want to lay down a pattern that's quite and then emphasize it a little bit, like with some manual, you know. This guy would probably have kind of dirty skin, I imagine. So also like references of skin pores. I could have turned on symmetry, by the way, for this. But lowering the C intensity. Like, and skin pores would do vary depending on. If you look at some references, typically, like in the nose, would probably have larger pores. So you would vary the size, and you can do that with the drag rectangular stroke. You can go over and kind of vary that a little bit. Time-consuming process. There's a texture library, like texturing XYZ. These are actually now used a lot in production, so high-end. So they've updated this now, so these are new. This is interesting. But these are obviously based on like real data. So male phase 40s. I don't know do I have one of those? Maybe on the server. Let's see. I forget. There's something here. I don't think there's. Yeah, so it would definitely be kind of a chapter on its own, like tertiary details. So I arguably, yeah, you can never make a great sculpt by adding tertiary details. So the work is really in the primary forms, secondary forms. So I would encourage you to spend more time with that. But if you're really happy with one of your sculpts and you want to take it further, obviously adding a lot of tertiary details can be fun, but it would take some time on your part. Probably look into like best practices. But consider these texturing XYZ libraries because it can really be a time saver. Let's see if opening this document is not a time saver. Reading Photoshop. It's very large, it seems. All right. Oh, there's one thing though that actually kind of more interesting than that, I think. But yeah, okay. So if you do decide to use one of these texturing XYZ, never mind. I don't think we have time to. But we can also come back to that next time. But we can use, for instance, the spotlight and then be projecting down based on the alpha, the image. So let's get back to that. But one thing that's kind of crucial for your conceptual sculpts would be kind of what was pointed out earlier. So what about like asymmetrical models, right? And this is kind of hard to do now because we've added accessories. So we have eyeballs and teeth, and we could have added a tongue, and we have a little hat. And you probably would have had more accessories. So how can we pose this guy even though it has multiple accessories? There's a plugin for that. Called. Whoops. No. Oh no. My brush palette. Okay. Never mind. Called Transpose Master. I'm going to save this. Yeah, so let's ignore the tertiary details here. I'm actually going to not worry about that here. So all the little pores that we started doing, I'm going to delete that higher level because it's too heavy now. You could keep them there and reposition the mesh and just not have those levels active. But I'm just going to delete them. I don't need them anymore. 700,000. Okay, it should be okay. So then, yeah. So how this plugin works, you just go to the transpose master, and then go T-pose mesh. T-pose mesh complete. And now we can start posing. In other words, we can, like, for instance, if I mask this area off, invert the mask, and go to move, you can see that all those subtools I can move them as if they were one object. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So here, so let's say I want to rotate him a little bit. I'd probably, yeah, I would want to mask off. So this becomes a masking job. You're going to have to mask off areas. Let's see. Okay, so I do want those to be affected, and then the arms. So I can go, let me go to the mask lasso. Okay. And then if I hold Control Alt, not Control, I can take away from the mask. So I'm just taking away these areas. Control Alt. Oh, my symmetry is off. No. Okay, do it here as well. So this is the mask lasso. It's kind of nice. There. So now I should be able to. Oh, and one more thing to. If I want to smooth the mask, I can do it on the menu under masking, blur mask. There's also, if we just control click on the mask, you see now I'm kind of blurring, making much more of a gradient. So then I can go and rotate. You can see it kind of works. Oops, not scale. So this really starts adding a lot quite quickly to both the believability and the kind of feel of the character. Because you can, like a lot of the gesturing and the kind of pose says a lot about the character. Like, what is he up to? Here he seems a little curious or something, looking at something. Like, huh? Yeah. So you see that like immediately there's a little bit more life. Like there's a little less perfect symmetry. Yeah, so that's kind of how that works. So there's a lot of masking to do. It does become a little tedious, but it works. You just have to keep masking areas. So if I wanted to move, let's say, his forearm a little bit, I'll invert this, and I control click. I can make this mask a little. And yeah, I'm just going to use the old school transpose tool. So I can rotate from this pivot. I go like that. It'll rotate from there. I can go like that. So it is very kind of manual labor, but uh, you've all tried rigging, so you know that as opposed to rigging it only for the purpose of having a quick pose, this is not so bad because there's no rigging involved. It's just like quick. This is simply for the conceptual sculpt to sort of breathe a little more life into it. And we can obviously also, once I move something, I would have to readjust like the musculature to sort of fit that new pose. So yeah, that's a lot of work. Maybe he's holding on to something there. Yes, I could have added an object there that. So maybe we want to tilt his head a little bit, make him seem even more confused. So we can do that, mask out this portion, and then we're gonna blur the mask, invert the mask, so I can draw out this transpose tool again. So I'm in move, just click W, I draw that out, and then I can go to like W, E, R, I can go move, scale, or rotate. So if I go to rotate, I can still draw it out again. So now it will, if I start rotating from here, it will rotate based on this pivot. I can go like that. Or if I hold shift and rotate, I will, in the middle, it will rotate around that axis. So I can go like that. And then move. And the whole purpose of the, probably, maybe I want to rotate the whole torso like a little bit more. Let's see. And for this, maybe I'll turn off perspective. So have a little bit more precise masking. So let me rotate here. Also that. Invert that, blur the mask. Actually, let me mask a little bit more like that. Blur the mask. Draw the transpose line. Whoops. So you gotta be careful with the, if I want to move the transpose line, I can't be in the middle, but I have to hit that outer circle. Then I can move it. So I want to place it near his spine, kind of, yeah, more or less like that. And then shift, rotate, so I can rotate the whole dude. Yeah. So you get the idea, that's kind of it. And then maybe now I wanted to actually move this whole arm back a little. So it does take a lot of work, but at least we can sort of get a much more interesting pose for a conceptual, for a concept, basically. If you want to convince someone this could be a great character for a project, you don't want to showcase him just in a very stiff, neutral, perfectly symmetrical pose, probably. And this is relatively quick, like once you sort of get that, how that works. So BMT. Yeah, so there's some refinement that you would have to do again. But the pose really helps bring him to life. And then, yeah. All right, so when you're kind of happy, you're done posing, we're going to go back to the transpose master. This is only if you have multiple subtools that you, if you don't have multiple subtools, you could just keep posing him without using the transpose master. But you do want to have more like eyeballs and some different stuff. So, all right. So anyway, so then we go T-pose to subtools. I think that's it. Yep. Then it will do the, it will move all the subtools with it. There you go. And now it's essentially back. It's just like you moved everything. So I would recommend storing a symmetrical version and kind of be modeling. Not necessarily, but I mean, it would be easier if you're intending this to be a production model that you have a symmetrical version. But if you're sitting down to do a conceptual sculpt, I wouldn't worry usually about that because it's very, very common to actually be sculpting with asymmetry. So I would still be sculpting a lot on this version of the model. And then it would, like, that's just the nature of things. Like, it's easier to do this artistically, not having that mindset. Oh no, I need to this to be like perfect. You know, just worry about like making this as cool as you can. That would be my way to look at it. And then okay, it needs to be a production mesh because someone really loves it, and they're gonna love it if it's great. So I would not care about that, and then rather, okay, oh yeah, it needs to be a production mesh, and then that would be kind of the re-engineering. You would have to go back and then make it symmetrical, make the production mesh. It's a lot of work, yes, but yep, that I think in the end that's a better approach. And obviously, but if you're on a tight deadline and you're working on a project and your job is not to come up with the coolest concept ever, but it's actually to come up with a production model, my mindset would be different. It's like, oh, I have 3 weeks to do this. I would sculpt something symmetrical, and or do some rough concepts but very quick, and then use that as a base for myself. Like so, it would. I think it varies a little bit whether if you're currently producing a production model or if you're kind of more of a concept artist, kind of or on your own doing whatever you want, right? So for this class, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. So obviously, yeah, and this has subdivision levels, so arguably this would be good enough. Uh, I think this topology looks really good. I mean, if it were for a production, you would have to go in and really analyze the facial topology. So you see, yeah, it's not perfect. This is pretty good. This is it's actually surprisingly good. Radial topology. So I would export this to Maya, obviously, like an OBJ, and keep analyzing it. Um, but it looks very good. I mean, it probably in here there are some artifacts that we could run the C remesher again or do it manually. Yeah, like this is not so logical, it seems like. It's not bad. It's not bad. But ideally, you'd have like perfectly circular edge loops around the eye sockets. There seems to be some unmotivated action going on here. Maybe. We'd have to look at it in Maya to be sure. But it seems like there's some, this is kind of a spiraling effect. So like it goes like this, and then it spirals in. You see that? The edge loop, we don't really want that. So it probably, you'd run a couple more times with the C remesher with the guide curves. You make some guide curves around the eye sockets. Yep. But for this class, we don't need like perfect animation friendly topology. If you really want to go in there and make it, that would be good, but you don't have to. This is already retopologized, like technically, and it has subdivision levels. So this would be cool. And then keep working with this. Yeah. So any questions? Yeah. Yeah. You can make the basic shapes like wherever you want, Maya or whatever you want to use. I don't care. Yeah, so that's common. So if you feel more comfortable sculpting or modeling something in Maya and then importing it as an OBJ, that's perfect. So that'll be that. And yo, oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Yeah, if it's a statue, if it's not gonna deform, then it wouldn't need to be animation friendly. If it's a statue and it's never gonna deform, actually none of the really matters. It could be whatever topology as long as it's like logical. Then in that case, for like a statue, yeah, like even the whole deal with like radial, you wouldn't really need that. So yeah, yeah, yeah. But maybe the statue would come to life. Then you'd be in trouble if you don't have. It's just an exercise to try, make an animation-friendly topology once. So if you do have the time, it's a good thing to try to make that perfect topology because it's doable. It's doable. Other things, yeah, I've been kind of cursing the fact that the keyshot doesn't work. If it did work, we would click there. We do have the license, it's just not working. So again, send angry email here. But then if this were enabled, we could click there and it would send it to Keyshot. That would be very nice. But now when we hit there, it just uses ZBrush's internal render. And you can do pretty cool things with the internal render also. Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah, Keyshot is great. So, but you can do really cool things with this render if you use render passes. So I can send different render passes to Photoshop. So this is actually, it's set up very easily. So if I click here once, it will store this render as a PSD. I can go, okay, save it. And it gives you a depth pass, okay, and shadow, mask. But then I can do more renders and I can change the light. So let's say I'll do a, okay. Why is that so horrible? I don't know. That's strange. Huh. Oh, we're in matte cap. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have to, okay, so these are matte cap materials. They have light information baked into them. So we can't really use this lighting system, but you have to use one of these standard materials. So I'm just going to use basic material. I just want a pass that would give me kind of a rim light to accentuate the back of the character. So you can play around with the render settings and properties and make this. It's a little clunky, but uh, you can make it look good, but it would be a little bit more compositing, like sending this to Photoshop and then compositing layers together. So let me just show you, like, technically, I'm not going to spend time with that, but just if I open up, so this would be one, and then let's do this. So I can Control A, Control C, Control V, and then I'd want to set this to add. So let me actually, I can turn this down. So see, now I can actually control the lighting. Whoops. Oh, let me add just black layer. So it can gradually increase the effect of that rim light just by setting this to add. So it's like a more compositing work, but you can create quite convincing results. So I can also kind of imitate the look of kind of a fill light. So to send the light to the back, you can click here onto the gray area. It will be in the back of the object. If I click here again on the sphere, I guess no. Click once again in the gray area, then it's back to the front. And I could do like a front lit, which would just be kind of a fill light. And I can throw this out of here. And then Control A, Control C. It's kind of a cool render. It looks like he's in the flashlight. Someone has spotted him. But I can use it as sort of a general fill light. So it's kind of interesting. I can mimic the look of kind of bounced light. Then if I had poly paint, I could also do kind of a flat material, flat color. and send this out as a pass, which would only have colors. So it would be more like compositing. You would have to spend more time building up the layers. But people make pretty amazing art doing that as well. So yeah, you can probably find a lot of examples of that online. So the render passes, actually, they're quite powerful. And it's very simple, like the setup. Just click once and then you throw it out. What can we do with this? I guess we could like set up. There's ways also in After Effects, I guess, in Photoshop, you can set up using the depth pass as to control the uh, focal depth of the lens, so that you actually have areas of the model that would appear to be blurry or out of focus just by simply using this. I forget how to do that here. Uh, there's a simple way. There's like a filter. No, it's not that. Anyways, I should have looked that up beforehand. But you can look into this. I mean, there's great tutorials, people using these render layers. So if some of you want to experiment with that actually till next time, if you want to be outputting some interesting concepts, that'll be interesting to see. So yeah. Okay, so the lab will run as usual today. And tomorrow, I don't think I'm not gonna add any more lectures this time around until next time. So we'll just have lab tomorrow as well, from 12 till 8. I will be there. So we do not meet here in the morning. I think you should just work. For those of you who want to get started on the full body, I can give you some pointers when I'm here during today and tomorrow, or whatever you want to do. I'm here. And then next time we'll start with setting up like multi-UDIM. If you have a full body, if we were to render this or something in a VFX pipeline, you would have to know how to set up multiple UDIMs and then do a VFX render in Arnold. So we're just going to do that next time, like try to export 32-bit EXRs. And that will actually make it look like literally like the model you have in ZBrush. You will have the same result in the render because it will actually displace the render, the vertices at render time. So even if you have like many millions of polys, we can make it look exactly the same in the render. So it's not like a normal map where it kind of looks like the same, but it will be the same essentially. So that's very interesting. So it's not so relevant for games, but I would argue you should still know it. It should not be outside your realm of knowledge. You might need to do like conceptual renders or something. You never know. So it's in any case interesting. So yeah, that's it. See you on the lab. Soon. What time is it? What time is it? I don't have the. But yeah, like an hour-ish. I'll be there. 12:30. Hmm? Yeah. But whatever. I don't. Whatever you want to know. I don't know. I'm not gonna. No. 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 I would just challenge you to get started trying a full body sculpt and then see how it goes. Mm.